Welcome to the Stereoactive Movie Club. My name is Jeremiah, and I'm here with Alicia, Mia, Steven, and our special guest for this round of movies, Michelle. And we're going to be talking about the 1957 film Wild Strawberries, directed by Ingmar Bergman. But before we go on, let's hear from everyone about one movie they've watched recently that they want to talk about here. Steven, let's start with you.
I watched the Whitney Houston biopic, I Want to Dance with Somebody. It was on Netflix. My nephew alerted me to it, and I hadn't seen it in the theater, so I wanted to watch it. It was pretty good. It's really awkward. I've gotten to this age where I actually see biopics of people that I really remember. So it was kind of weird to see a kind of a dramatization of events that you've kind of lived through. But overall, it was good. It was pretty strongly acted. And then some of the stuff was, I think it was just more about the music for me. I really did enjoy just hearing the music again and just remembering all of the hits that she came up with. And, but they were a little light on story. I felt like they kind of breezed over a lot of things, but that's kind of the problem when you have somebody who has such a storied career as her with a lot of different issues that came up. But overall, it was a good 2 hours and 24 minutes, which I also felt was long. So that was kind of interesting that it was very long, but yet it wasn't very substantive. But overall, it was fine. It was good.
Who played Whitney? Sorry.
What was that actress's name? I have to look it up. But yeah, I hadn't seen her. I hadn't seen her in anything before, but that's kind of meaningless.
Steven, did they cover her drug use?
They did. And that was kind of one of the issues that I had because at some point, like when she and Bobby Brown are getting divorced or she trying to drop a hammer on him, she's like, the press is really blaming him for her drug use. And she's like, we started this way before. And they had some scenes of her like maybe smoking weed, but it didn't seem like she had a problem necessarily. So that was kind of, I felt like that was kind of glossed over a little bit, or it was much worse when she was with Bobby, which might have been the truth. But they also brought in her relationship with her friend, I guess, Robin. I don't know if necessarily they were friends or lovers or whatnot, but they did bring that in to make it, that they actually were in kind of a relationship and they lived together. But so that was kind of a surprise to me that they did that because I think it was done by her estate. So that was kind of an interesting take, which I think was kind of good that they put that in because I remember at the time they always speculated it because, you always saw it in the tabloid covers and stuff. So, but yeah, it was good.
Alicia, what have you watched recently?
No, I really can't think of any movie that I watched that I haven't mentioned on here. I mean, I did watch a movie. I watched A View from the Top with Gwyneth Paltrow. And I watched that because there was a How Did This Get Made episode about it that I wanted to listen to and understand. So I watched that. It's not good. It's it was very confused. It came out in 2003 and she wants to be a steward, or she wants to be a flight attendant, I should say. And then it's a very confused movie. It's like it wants to be a broad comedy in some parts, and it's also trying to be a rom-com of sorts, but it's not that funny in those parts. It's very grounded in some scenes, and it's just all over the place. It's a mess. But I watched it.
Michelle, what have you watched?
A couple weeks ago when we were in the Midwest, we saw Super Mario Brothers in the theater with some kid family members and Zoe, and my expectations were very low. So I actually kind of enjoyed it. Jack, on the other hand, was very critical of it. So I've made fun of him for that. He was saying, it didn't show enough of New York City. The scene that was supposed to be in Dumbo, wasn't, didn't portray Dumbo as accurately. I'm like, what are you talking about? Most of the country in the world, they don't care about Dumbo, don't know about Dumbo, and it doesn't matter. It's a fantasy. But yeah, it was all right, and I think that they could have gone a little bit further even with the nostalgia, but there was a nice amount of it for, us who grew up a little bit playing those games. So it was fun.
Okay. And Mia?
I haven't watched any movies. I'm going to count Succession as a movie, though. That's all I care about right now. So you can shake your head, Steven. It's okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to say 127 hours, which we both watched. So a while ago. It's more than a week ago. More than since we watched that before the last time we recorded. So I'm dipping into that possibility of going back further. But it's a movie that I avoided when it came out because I don't know. I think I was just kind of over the Danny Boyle thing at that point for some reason, and I don't know. There was just something about the story that I was just like, I don't think I need to see this. I don't, and like the narrative around the movie, it was as it was released was that like people were fainting or throwing up and stuff because for people who don't know, it's a dramatization of that hiker who got his arm stuck while he was hiking out in I don't remember where now, but and then he had to cut his own arm off with a pocket knife. So very intense, but I thought it was a really good movie. Actually, it was much better than I ever thought it would be. I kind of wished I had seen it in a movie theater when it was out because I think that experience would have just been like even more intense in a good way. And it was just, like I said, just better than I expected. And the reason I watched it was because it got covered on Blank Check. They're doing a Danny Boyle miniseries, and they made it sound more appealing than I ever thought it was going to be. Yeah. So.
I think that it was nominated for an Academy Award, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor.
Mm-hmm.
I think it won something, maybe, but I don't recall. But that was also the year that Franco and Hathaway hosted the Oscars.
Oh,
Yeah.
And I remember it being very aware that he was nominated for an Oscar and hosting, and he seemed so disinterested in the one job. And then having seen the movie now, he was very good in the movie. Like I think he deserved that nomination. I mean, you could say what you want about how scummy he may be as a real person. I don't think we all knew that at that time. We knew he was kind of like this guy putting himself out there, this art freak or whatever you want to say. But yeah, anyway, maybe problematic, but the movie's pretty good. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I did look up who was starring as Whitney in the Whitney Houston biopic, and it was Naomi Ackie, who I hadn't seen in anything other than Star Wars. I just had to look her up. She was in Rise of the Skywalker, and she played, if anybody saw that, she was the woman who might have been Lando Calrissian's daughter, but they didn't really explain that very well. But that was who she was.
God, that was one of the most awkward little moments at the end of that movie of like, maybe we should go on an adventure together. And you're like, wait, they're kind of hinting she might be his daughter, but also it seems like he's into her because he's Lando.
And he's just into everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Pansexual Lando Calrissian. Anyway, so for those who may not have listened to the show before, this is a podcast where we discuss movies that have appeared on Sight and Sound Magazine's poll of the greatest movies ever made that comes out every 10 years. And again, this time we're talking about Wild Strawberries. But before we get into the history and background of the movie, what did each of us know about it going into this viewing? Who had seen it before? And if you hadn't, what were you expecting, if anything? And Alicia, since you picked this one, can you start us off and also remind everyone why you chose it?
So yes, I have seen this movie before. I had seen, I know when we did Persona, we kind of talked about which Bergman movies we had seen, and I've seen this one, The Seventh Seal, and one other one. I think it was Winterlight, but I'd have to look at the full like plot description to be sure. But yeah, I remember like really having a strong emotional like reaction to it the first time I saw it. And I just kind of wanted to revisit it. I hadn't seen it again since then, and that was probably at least 10, 15 years ago that I watched it. So I just wanted to give it another go. That was really my only real reasoning for it this time around. So,
Michelle, how about you?
I also saw it probably 20 to 25 years ago on VHS. I don't remember what inspired me to choose it, if it was for a class or anything, but I too had a vague recollection that I liked it, that I was surprised by how much I liked it, but I didn't really remember a lot of the details, just that he was traveling in the car, and I think I had an image of him lying down in a field, and watching part of his past kind of play out in front of him. But yeah, so I was, looking forward to revisiting it and seeing if now 20, 25 years older, if it resonated more.
Okay. And Mia?
So I had not seen this movie before, and other than watching Persona, I was not super familiar, or am not super familiar with Bergman's work. But I guess having seen Persona and the, kind of mind meldingness of that movie, I went into this with maybe like a slight bit of trepidation. I'm just like, okay, what is this going to be? And luckily it was a bit of an easier ride. So, but we'll get into that.
Steven?
I had never seen the movie before. And like Mia, I'd only seen Persona. So I was kind of having the same kind of trepidation in seeing this movie as well. And then I was thinking maybe, because I did read a synopsis of this before. So then I was curious to see if it was like some of the other movies we've seen, like Mirror, like if it was going to be like that. So I was kind of curious about it.
Okay. I had also seen it about, I think, 20 years ago or more, I think in college. I feel like so many of the movies we've watched recently, I either watched when I was really watching a lot of movies in high school, or I watched during college and then haven't seen since. So I didn't really remember much of it. I remembered that it was a guy in a car and he had visions or dreams or something. For some reason, I was remembering it as being more surreal than it is, having rewatched it, but I don't want to give too much away about my thoughts on it this time around. But I did remember thinking it was really good, even though I didn't remember basically anything about the actual moment-to-moment plot of it. So I was looking forward to seeing it again. So that's where I was. And that's where we all stood on the film before watching it for this episode. We'll get more into the film in just a moment, but first, let's take a break. And we're back. So, as we've done in recent episodes, I thought I'd start us off by reading from Sight and Sound's entry for the film on their website. As always, the parts that may be more subjective aren't from me personally, but perhaps we can delve into those things as we get into our group discussion. Together with The Seventh Seal, Wild Strawberries confirmed the reputation of Ingmar Bergman as one of world cinema's finest new talents. Opening with a starkly symbolic dream sequence, the film follows Professor Isaac Borg as he journeys by car in the company of his daughter-in-law Marianne, played by Ingrid Thulin, to collect an award from his former university. The trip occasions a series of reminiscences and reveries as the aging Borg revisits the scenes of his youth and reflects on an unhappy marriage. Bergman pays tribute to his forebears by casting great silent filmmaker Victor Sjöström as Borg, but strikes out for a new form of intellectual cinema characterized by probing into the nature of existence. Wild Strawberries also became a model for the road movie. Again, that was all from Sight and Sound's website. Wild Strawberries was Ingmar Bergman's 18th feature film in 11 years. It was written while he was in a hospital for stress and gastric issues, then quickly produced as his personal life was in disarray. Critics in Sweden pretty much loved the film, while its reception in the United States was more mixed. But its influence has been strong over the years, and directors such as Stanley Kubrick and Andrei Tarkovsky have listed it among their favorite films. The film was honored at various international film festivals and award ceremonies, including the Oscars, where, after opening in the US in 1959, it was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, though Bergman refused the nomination in a letter where he called the Oscars a quote-unquote humiliating institution for the art of motion pictures. The Doris Day Rock Hudson romantic comedy Pillow Talk is what eventually won Best Original Screenplay that year, while the big winner of the year overall was Ben-Hur. But to give a sense of what was popular in the United States when Wild Strawberries was released in Sweden a couple of years earlier, The Bridge on the River Kwai was the big Oscar winner for films released in 1957, and it was also the top-grossing film of the year in North America. As for our purposes, Wild Strawberries appeared in the top 10 of Sight and Sound's greatest films polling once, when it was ranked number 10 in 1972. In the 2022 polling, it was tied at number 108 by critics and tied at number 72 by directors. And among the filmmakers who had it on their top 10 lists that year was Michael Moore. So, Alicia, again, since this was your pick, can you start us off with your thoughts on the film and whether it met your expectations on this viewing, especially since you had seen it before?
I don't know if it met my expectations. I think I didn't remember, also like everyone else said, I didn't remember that much of the plot of it. I knew it was about like memory and nostalgia and that kind of thing, but I didn't remember like all the details. But I don't know. I've kind of felt like I enjoyed it, but this time I kind of felt like it was a little bit of like a combination of like a Christmas Carol, like reading Proust or something, like To the Lighthouse or by Virginia Woolf, something like that, like a very stream of consciousness type of thing. I guess that's because it's a road movie, because if you ask somebody like what happens in this movie, it's like, oh, they drove from Stockholm to London, he got his reward, and some other stuff happens in between where he's like having memories and things, but it's hard to like say that happens, in the course of the action of the movie. But so I don't know if it met my expectations. I definitely did not have as strong of like an emotional reaction this time. I thought it was a little it was emotional, but I wasn't as moved by it, I guess. I don't know. It didn't capture me this time the way that it did the first time. So I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it, really. Like it, I also thought like the girl that played the woman that was in Persona and is also in this one, Bibi Anderson, I think is her name. I liked her when she was playing the original Sarah character, but when she was playing the young, like 1950s like character, I was like, oh, this is like bordering on Manic Pixie Dream Girl or something. It was very like, aren't I so like snappy and cute and youthful and young? And yeah, I don't know. I thought probably like the most interesting section for me was the car accident with the actress and her husband and their dynamic and how like toxic and awful that was. And I loved that Marianne, the daughter-in-law, was like, for the sake of the young people in the car, get out of this car. I was like, that's actually really a very nice thing to do, to not expose these young people to this kind of middle-aged Sturm und Drang or something. So that's my thoughts.
All right. And Steven, how about you?
It's funny. I guess my expectations were not really like high, but I really, really enjoyed this movie. And maybe it just hit me at a time in my life where, I just had a birthday. So I was really just thinking about, how much time has passed and people's perceptions of what you think you are and what they think you are. And, everything's always kind of filtered through like, you might idealize the past a lot, but it didn't really happen that way. But you think it happened that way. Or you put more bearing on yourself as maybe regrets that you had, and that just comes to the forefront, even though things that happen are a little bit more like even, but you think of like the worst things that happen or the worst people feel of you, and you put those to the forefront. So I was just really interested in kind of that relationship that he had with himself. But the storytelling in and of itself, I really did like it. I kind of liked it as a road trip kind of thing. And it was a linear story. And I was thinking about like when we watched that other movie that I just had mentioned, I can't even remember the name of it now, where it was kind of like surreal and like dreams kept coming through, or it was kind of perception wise, it was kind of her
You're talking about Mirror?
Yeah, Mirror.
Okay.
But this was a little bit more linear for me, and I kind of liked how they would weave the story in with the actual dream sequences or what his thoughts were. And when the movie opened, I was a little bit worried about that because it was completely surreal, the dream he had. So I thought the whole movie was going to be like that. But thankfully it wasn't. It was a little bit more of a regular story. And they introduced people at the beginning, it was kind of like a pilot episode. It was like, oh, this is my daughter-in-law and she's staying with us and she's going to come with me. And I'm getting an award in 14 hours. Why didn't I just drive? And so I kind of liked, and they pick up a stranger along the way and, they'd have like fun conversations about it. So I kind of liked it, and I was there for, I guess, the Sarah character, just kind of being carefree and fun, because it really affected him a lot. Like, I could just tell that he really liked her, and he liked her spiritedness. And so I feel like that kind of worked for me. But overall, I just really liked the performances, and I liked the way it was kind of, weaving in and out between, what was real and what was real, what wasn't real and what was real on the road trip. But overall, yeah, I really was there for it for some reason.
I think your analogy of it to being a pilot made you live up to your old screen name, wherever it was, of Little Stevie Loves Stevie. Mia, how about you?
It was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I watched it once, a week ago or whatever, and then I kind of like sped watched it earlier today as a refresher. And like, I enjoyed it. I felt like it gave me some things to think about, like, the themes of nostalgia and getting older, and yeah, like your life not maybe measuring up to how you thought it would, or what are you leaving behind in the world, like, all those things that I think can keep you up at night. It didn't like super emotionally move me, but even when I was thinking about this earlier, I was thinking, oh, I bet I could watch this at a different point in life, like if I just had like a loss in my family or a birthday and maybe feel differently. I just think like right now it wasn't the time for me to feel like super moved by this. Overall, though, Alicia, I agree with like a lot of what you're saying. Like I was thinking about A Christmas Carol a lot, and I was like, oh my God, this is like grown up Christmas Carol. The second Sarah just kind of annoyed me a lot, which I like. It didn't like, she annoyed me, but I was also like, you're like a 20-something, girl hitchhiking around with like these two guys who I guess are like both in love with you. Like I would be annoying too, like I didn't like hold her annoyingness against her. I was just more like maybe a little less of her. But like, I thought it was interesting, and definitely as a Bergman movie, I would maybe tell someone like, watch this one first before watching Persona. It was, and then like, okay, if you like this, like maybe go on. Like, I kind of wish maybe we'd done it in this order just for like a bit more digestible process. I really liked Marianne though. Like I thought, I'm blanking on the actress's name right now, but I thought she was great. I loved her style, like the scene with her and her shitty husband when she tells him she's pregnant and she has that like fabulous Swedish raincoat. I was very into that. And I was just like, Marianne, like, please get out of this family. Like your husband is like clearly suffering from some kind of like major depressive issues and like childhood traumas. His dad is nice enough to you, but like, I don't know, man, just I get out of this family, go like find wherever your family is and like raise your child in like a nice little Swedish village somewhere or something. But like, please run. Like the scene with the mom, the old mom. Oh, I have all these grandchildren. No one ever comes to visit me. I have these creepy old dolls and things in a box. Like, I don't know. I did not like that at all. And it just, we all have those older relatives, I'm sure, or have friends with those older relatives where it is like, no one visits me, no one calls, and you're just like, duh, look at like how you act. Like, oh my God. So I found that very realistic, but also like, oh my God, look at this family here. They're just so depressing, like from top to bottom. So yeah, run, Marianne, run. It's more that was my strong emotional reaction to the movie.
Michelle, how about you?
I'm kind of with you, Alicia. I guess I was expecting to be pretty devastated because reading about it again, and then also chalking up to like when I first saw it, I was much younger, and I thought it just didn't hit, a nerve or hit me in the gut the way it should. And, but I also agree with you, Stephen, that I definitely enjoyed the storytelling, the acting. I thought that, the professor was so expressive with just doing little, very little. I really liked him. And I wonder if part of it was, for me anyway, that to me, it didn't feel like he went through much of an emotional arc. I mean, everything was so subtle, and there were definitely some subtle moments that I found quietly moving, like, when he is at the family summer house and he sees, I don't know if it would have been a memory that he necessarily had seen, or that's what I found kind of interesting, when he happened upon his brother and Sarah, and the little dalliance they had. I wondered, he supposedly was out with his papa, sailing. And so I thought that was really interesting that he was seeing little glimpses into moments that happened in his life that kind of defined what his life was or wasn't. But he wasn't part of that memory, in the first person actively, So I found I was moved by that, but I was kind of expecting it to build and to really just be in tears or something at the end. And I wasn't, but I did find the ending, mostly satisfying. But yeah, and I just kind of felt like he was a likable gentleman throughout the, the whole film. And not that I would have wanted him to be like this, more curmudgeonly or like, get off my lawn, because that does kind of sound sitcom-y and simple. But I just found him, he felt, to me, it seemed like he was really open to new people and new experiences from the beginning. So it just wasn't, everything was just very subtle, but I loved all the performances, and I loved the photography, and the compositions were beautiful. Oh, and also one more thing. The first dream he has, remember, with the handless watches, and he sees that blob faced, person who, and that was very surreal and dark. And I kind of thought that there'd be more of that, and I felt like it was kind of Lynchian as well. And then I liked the, when they were on the road and it would show shots of the road and shots of like maybe the trees overhead, going by, and such, stark imagery. And I enjoyed that element as well. And again, I kind of felt like I was a little Lynchian as too. But yeah, overall I liked it, but I was surprised that at how my ultimate emotional response was.
Yeah, I'm with you all who'd seen it before. Similarly, I don't think it hit the same this time. I still thought it was well made. I still did enjoy it overall, but I think my vague memory of it was bigger than the experience of watching it this time. And I do think some of that is that, like, I remembered it as being much more surreal than it is. Like, there is that surreal opening dream sequence. And I guess you could say that, like, some of the stuff that you were just describing, for instance, Michelle, you could say is surreal in a way of, like, he's sort of manufacturing these, not quite memories, but his interpretation of how things happened between other people when he wasn't around that affected him. So I don't know if that's quite surreal, but it's not quite real either necessarily. It's manufactured in some way. But like I said, I did think it was very well made. I agree that the acting is all really good. I think the lead, he's very good, and like I think if he's not, the movie doesn't work at all, and does work. And I think I liked BB Anderson. Was that her name? I liked BB Anderson more than other people did. I mean, I know it seems like everybody liked her in the flashbacks. People have mentioned it, but not as the hitchhiker girl.
I liked her as a hitchhiker
girl. You did? Oh, you did. Okay, I missed that. I liked her as the hitchhiker girl too. I found it really interesting, that casting, which I would like to get it more into maybe in a minute. But yeah, I thought she was really good in both roles. And like I said, overall, it's a good movie. I still appreciate the filmmaking of it. It just didn't hit the same. I wondered if that was also like, I wondered if it was like that when I watched it when I was 20 something. still in college, if I was just like, wow, this seems sophisticated and it's cool, and I appreciate that I can watch this and appreciate it and understand it, and like this, like it seemed like deep to me as a 20-year-old in a way that like I wasn't finding this time, and I wonder if it is like at this point. I think that there's something to what Steven said, and Michelle, you kind of echoed this. I think that maybe it's just like you have to be in the right moment. And like maybe this is a movie that, if depending on when you watch it, it's going to really connect with you, and you're going to find a deep connection to it in a way that at other times you're just not going to find that deep connection, but you can still appreciate it. So I do think if I had like a birthday or was like dying and going on a road trip at the same time, or not dying, but approaching death, maybe this movie would hit harder. But yeah. Anyway. So
I have a little
Alicia.
interesting
Alicia.
tidbit.
Yeah.
So I guess B.B. Anderson's real first name is Barrett, which is also the name of the actress wife in that car accident that crashes the car.
Mm.
And around the time they were making the movie, Bergman and B.B. Anderson's like affair was ending.
Right.
So I was like, wow, was that just like a big fuck you to name that actress with her real name and then say all that horrible shit to her?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, can we say, based on this movie and Persona and any other movies that any of us have seen by Ingmar Bergman, that dude is a messy bitch?
It's fun.
I had a lot of fun earlier today reading his Wikipedia, and he was like married like 5 times, and even like his last wife was like the one that really stuck. I think they were married for like 25 years until she died or something. But like they had one child together, but the child was born 12 years before they got married.
oh my
And
God.
yeah, I know. And even throughout all of his marriages, he had like, his well-known affairs with like B.B. Anderson and this, like, like really famous people. But then he had like literally just like countless other affairs and stuff. And I'm like, dude, like,
Wow.
how do you have the time? And just, ugh. So yeah, he was definitely messy. It's like his poor wives.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably knew at a certain point, what you're signing up for and all that, but still.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, he had a reputation, I'm imagining.
Alicia, you brought it up that that one character has the same name as BB's actual name, and it seems to kind of mirror a real life relationship that he's writing into this movie. And so I find it interesting that he's kind of manifesting these relationships in his life into this movie in this other form, and you kind of see the lead character in a way doing that as well somehow, like, because obviously that hitchhiker, I mean, if you didn't get it from the casting being like the same woman playing 2 Sarahs, and in both realities, she is pined after by 2 men that she's having trouble choosing between. Like, I mean, this old man is basically manifesting it in a way that like calls maybe to me into question the reality of what we think is the reality of the movie. Like, I think it's easy to look at the movie and obviously think that the road trip portion of it, the trip is reality, but isn't it a little too convenient that he has this woman show up who is like so clearly modeled on this person from his youth that he lost to his brother? Or like, I mean, maybe that's not real either. Maybe it's all just like in his head. I don't know.
I always have a feeling that when you're faced with something that you're already thinking about, it jumps out at you. So whenever you get involved in situations, you might think about it like, oh, wait, this is exactly what happened to me when I was 12. Even though it doesn't necessarily, have any resonance, but it does to you.
Right.
So I feel like there's some other things probably that he didn't pick up on that they were doing that were completely different.
I think you could interpret it too. Like, I'm sure people have written a perfectly plausible analysis of this where it's like the road trip never happened. It's all, it was all a dream, right? And then other people are like, no, it literally happened in XYZ.
Yeah,
It's all Agda's fantasy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all a movie. It's all made up. So like,
True.
Right.
Yo, guys, all of this is made up.
Yeah, we're living in a simulation, obviously, and all that stuff. But yeah, I like the idea though of Sarah being a manic pixie dream girl. I hadn't thought of it quite like that, but she essentially is in a way. Like she's just this idealized form of woman that he's like. I mean, come on, this old man is like interested in her, like not maybe in a romantic way, but he's connecting her to this Sarah from his youth, his sister-in-law, I guess.
And then I found that the housekeeper's role, right? That she was kind of the one that grounded him, and it was interesting. She was kind of like the bookends, to his journey. And I liked the little exchange they had at the end where she's like, we know how to behave ourselves. Don't don't get so intimate where we call each other by the first names,
right?
Our first names.
But then she was like, I'm leaving my door open in case
you need anything.
Just saying.
Yeah, I'm sure we're projecting. I thought we were projecting our 2023 like lifestyles on them, and it was just like,
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I mean, she was making like eyes a little bit, I think.
I know.
So
A little
in that moment,
I saw that.
Yeah. But that's an interesting point, Michelle. I hadn't really thought of it like that she's grounding him. So it's like, did he want to go on this road trip to get away from her and just kind of like unground himself and think through his life? Because he's like, why am I getting this award? Am I worthy of accolades? I've lived this life. Is it a bad life? Was it a good life? Like my son sucks. Like my relationship with my wife sucked. My all his relationships basically suck. And but he was good at whatever he was doing as a doctor or scientist or whatever. I didn't think that was clear in the movie.
Yeah.
I read the Wikipedia and they go into detail a little bit of like what he was. And I was like, where did this come from? I don't know where they got that from.
I thought he was some sort of medical doctor because of the couple that he met at the gas station. They were loving on him. They were just like, just like, he's so great. I should never have left this town because everybody just appreciated him so much. I'm going to name my child after him. So I felt like he definitely, like what he talked about being an outwardly like really great guy was true because it seemed like he was getting accolades, obviously, and then personal ones from those people.
Sure. Well, do you guys consider him navel-gazing at all? Because like even what you just said, how you framed it, Stephen, I think is accurate that he was sort of like, maybe I shouldn't have left because everyone liked me here. So it's not even about like I was doing good here. It's like they knew how to appreciate this guy right here,
Did he say that? I can't remember I remember him saying maybe I should have never left here, but I don't remember if he like supplied a reason or not.
I guess I thought it was. I thought what Steven said was accurate though. To like, why else would he be saying that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe I'm wrong.
My take kind of is that it's not so much that he's navel-gazing. All of the kind of greeting card, sayings and cliches about at the end of your life, it's not really the accomplishments or the accolades, but it's your relationships. And I think that's kind of it. And I think like maybe in seeing, glimpses at the relationships he's had throughout his life, I kind of felt like he's looking back on them and thinking like these were not successful. I did not feel loved or appreciated. And, when they do bring up loneliness and the thought of loneliness, and didn't that come out in the dream where he's being humiliated and you see the hitchhikers and you see the toxic couple and she laughs in his face at like, like you're a fraud basically. And so I kind of feel like it's a journey more about like, who was my family? Who were the people I loved? Who were the people who didn't love me? And so that moment with the gas station attendant, I feel like that was like a little seed that was dropped, like that he, in another like kind of moment where he felt that yearning for like maybe what could have been like he could have had a life where he did have meaningful relationships, because if your family all sucks, as was mentioned before, it's like at the end you're like, and even his mother, he's doing due diligence. He, you kind of get the feeling that he likes her or he cares for her. Maybe he doesn't like her, but he doesn't have a problem with going to visit her. He feels like he needs to. But yeah, like she just was kind of cold. She even refers to herself as cold, I think. And then he just leaves, And so I guess, yeah, it does make you think at the end of our lives, like, you look back on the relationships you've had and were they meaningful,
But I think for him, I think it's all about like this like public private thing, because I think like I agree, like it sounds like his wife was terrible and we don't really see like why she was apparently like habitually cheating on him. We don't really know why his mom was the way she was, but like, we got to think that he played some role in all of this, or at least like didn't take responsibility for these things. And like, at the beginning of the movie, Marianne's like, remember what you said to me last week when I came to you and like asked for a favor? And he's like, oh, I said I'd be delighted. And she's like, no. You said
quote.
All these, quote.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was like, this woman's memory. She's like, no, you said all of this stuff here. And like, he's really nice to the hitchhikers. And like, yeah, I was kind of struck that like, oh, there's this duality. Like he does seem really open to new experiences for like this old dude and all of this. But like, he's really like, it's kind of playful, but like he's kind of like mean to his housekeeper person. And he's like insisting that his son pays him back this loan that like clearly he doesn't actually need the money for. And like, what's he going to do with the money anyways? He's unsupportive of his daughter-in-law, but he's willing to be, but I bet he was like the nicest doctor in this like rural area to people, because he wanted people to think of him a certain way. So I think it's like this very like, he's all about the public stuff. And now at the end of his life, he's like, oh, my son, like, the look on his face when his daughter-in-law is like, your son hates you. Like, he's so hurt by that. And, at the end, then he's kind of trying to talk to his son and be like, wait, about the loan. And he's like, yeah, Dad, I'm going to pay you. And then they get cut off. And like, you're like, no, like, because I think like despite his, you see the good that is in him despite how shitty he can be. And so you're like, you're kind of rooting for him throughout the movie, or at least I was. Because you do see, like, it would be very hurtful to have the woman you love, like, choose your shitty brother over you. And then to have your wife, like, stepping out on you all the time. And, you're seeing it all from his perspective. So, of course, you're like feeling all that hurt. But I think it's also kind of like a Christmas Carol, a lesson that, you have to treat the people who are closest to you, the way you would treat your patients out in public and stuff. And all the accolades in the world don't matter if you don't have your family around you holding your hand as you die.
I agree with what Mia said about the whole public-private split. Like I think he's better in public. The people in the town like him because he's the doctor who does very well for them. And the kids that they pick up like him because they don't know the private him. Like they think he's this kindly old man, and that's the public face he presents. And I think maybe what you're pointing to, Mia, about the moment where he says to his daughter-in-law, like, "Oh, I treated you this way," and she's like, "Actually, no, you didn't, asshole." It's like him confusing public for private. He's remembering like how he would have treated someone in public, and like he's replaced that in his memory because he just doesn't want to face who he is or something. I guess
I feel like he is kind of faced who he is just from the sequences of dreams or like what he's thinking about. Because he wasn't there for a lot of the scenes at the beginning where Sarah's talking with the man that she eventually marries, saying like he's a cold person, like he doesn't have any excitement in his life, and it's really him who's saying these things because he wasn't there for it. And there are several instances where, in the dream sequences or, in his memories that aren't really, he's seeing, he does kind of address the fact that he is kind of like a person that is kind of reserved and it's a regret for him. So the parts that, that have come out, he's being polite instead of being the person that he feels like he should be, because that's what he has control over. Like, he has control over his public persona, but he doesn't have any control over his feelings necessarily. So he's regretful about those.
To a certain extent, we all act a different way in public and private, of course. And like, we all have our stories that we tell ourselves about, this is the kind of person I am. And like, this is how I would respond if someone like came to me and asked for help. And like, of course, we don't always live up to like the best version of ourselves. And of course, over time, maybe not as quickly as the like 2-week turnaround as he did with his daughter-in-law, but like, of course, over time, it's easy to build up a story of like, oh, I didn't handle that situation wrong. I did X, Y, Z. Or, even if you handled it wrong, you can justify it to yourself because of all of this. So I think, when he's going back into these memories that he wasn't here for, I wonder how much of that is his mind. And, he's had 50 years or whatever it's been since Sarah left him to build these stories in his head and tell himself, well, this is why. And then maybe almost further calcify those behaviors, right? He's like, well, she left me because I'm a cold person. That's who I am. I can't help it. And probably in some ways, those things helped him be a really good doctor, right? Like, you have to be logical and calculating and unemotional and all that stuff. So, maybe on the one hand, he's like, well, I'm going to lean into that. It's going to help me in my career, even if he wasn't like consciously thinking that. But, again, at the cost of what for the rest of his life?
I think doctors in general are very good at compartmentalizing everything. So it's not that they're unemotional. It's just that they don't let that in. They have to really move on from it quickly and then deal with it, like at a later date when they can deal with it. So maybe that is actually a really good choice of career for this character, because he is very, very much compartmentalized, I think. Especially you can see when he deals with his mother. And he's just kind of like, yep, yep, okay, bye.
Right.
Like, he just doesn't let it get to him. But you can tell like what you were saying is very true. He thinks of himself as a reflection of her in that very similar cut off sort of manner.
Well, I feel like we're inching towards Alicia's question for the group. So, Alicia, I think maybe you should ask that and we should get to that.
Okay, so the question was, did you believe in the change in Isaac at the end, or did the movie make its case that he chooses to embrace people more closely moving forward?
I think, yeah, I did believe in it. Just from the dreams or the memories that he had and the relationships that he was having with Marianne, like, I think just the road trip in general with the students, I felt like there was a subtle change throughout. So it felt like it was building towards him being a changed person, just based on his reactions to what was going on. And then also with meeting with his mother, he kind of realized this is what kind of person that he'll become if he doesn't end up kind of changing what he's doing. So I felt like that was kind of a turning point for him. And then overall, I felt like, getting the honor, I think he was much more honored by the kids that came and played guitar and saw him off. So I did feel like it was sort of earned in that respect, that he was kind of being a changed person. And the fact that he did reach out to his son at the end and asked him to sit, I really was kind of moved by that situation. So I do feel like it did happen.
Michelle?
I believe the same. I could be wrong, but I thought that he was going to tell his son, forget about the debt, and then they got interrupted. To go back to the exchange with the housekeeper, and he suggested, let's just call each other by our first names. We've known each other for 40 years, and so, like you said, Stephen, it was very subtle, but yeah, I think that he did change.
Yeah.
I think any changes will be temporary, personally.
Maybe temporary is fine if he's that old.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to die in 2 weeks, right?
It's all temporary.
Oh,
it's all temporary there.
True, it is all temporary.
Right.
Dark.
I mean, well, like how much, just, he has a whole lifetime. Like what's he gonna, how much do we really think like a 78-year-old man or however old he's supposed to be, 78? I don't know why the number's in my head.
I think that's how old the actor was.
Okay.
I think he said he was 78 and the housekeeper said she was 74.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so how old or how much change, like really change is going to happen? I think yes, I definitely think he was going to pay back the loan. He's being a little more chill with his housekeeper. Maybe something will develop between them. That would bring me such great joy. Maybe some stuff will happen. I would love to see like a continuation of this where Marianne leaves the son and has the baby and Isaac like supports them and leaves all his money to his grandchild. I don't know why I assumed it was a son. That would be like really wonderful. And I would love that. But I don't know, man. I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like even if you're 78, even if you have a year left to live, that's still worth it.
Absolutely.
Don't know.
He should change.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know. I just don't have a lot of faith.
Okay.
I forgot to say one thing too. Was it when I forgot who he was telling, maybe it was Marianne, about that dream where he's humiliated. And he does say something like, I think it's a voice telling me what I'm not aware of in my waking life or something like that, and yeah, I feel like, at 78, the whole, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So just even a little bit of self-reflection and looking back and trying to learn, he's not going to like do a 180, but I think those subtle changes could bring him more peace as he sails off into the sunset, so.
Yeah, I guess this might be a cop out, but I feel like there's not enough information to know to make the determination of whether I think at the end of the movie, it seems like he's realized that it would be good to change, but it's hard to say whether he will because he's in this moment of he's just gone through all this. He's gone through all this reflection, and I think it's in those moments where we mentally commit to something. That doesn't mean you do it. Like often we don't. Let's think about that. Like I think we could all think of something in our many things in our lives where we've reflected and been like, I really need to change this part of how I'm behaving, or I would like to chart a new path. Easier said than done. Easier thought than done. So I don't know. I think, but I do think he in that moment wants to. So if that is the actual success, I guess he's successful. But I think it's hard to say past that personally. Alicia, since it's your question, what do you think, especially after all we've said?
Yeah, my first instinct was like similar to Mia. Like I feel like he had a moment. He was like, I need to be better about this. But yeah, I feel like at that age, it would be, even at, like you were saying, even at our ages, it's really hard to make the changes that you need to make on that level. Like that's a big level change to make. So I was also thinking like, I don't know how long this is going to last. It is nice that he had this experience, and hopefully, I'm hopeful that it will, manifest in his life and that he'll be able to carry it through. But I'm just like a little skeptical. Maybe that's just, I'm a very cynical person or something. I don't know.
And one other thing I was going to say is sometimes I think what's so hard about making change is like it's yourself, but it's also the people around you, right? Because like it's scary to make change, right? And you need other people to support you in it, or at least like accept that you're making these changes. And like he tries to talk to his son about the loan, and his son's like, yeah, Dad, I know. And like they don't get to it. And then he asks the housekeeper like about calling them by more casual names, and she's like, no, we're not going to do that. So like honestly, it might even be like he's trying to make changes, and if the people in his life also have these narratives of who he is and how he acts, and they're, it's not like people in his life are super young and flexible. Yeah. And, I don't get the vibes from them that they'll be like, oh yeah, Dad, you want to make these like really dramatic changes. Like his son doesn't seem like a really flexible person. So it also might just be like, he's like, well, like everyone around me is just making this really challenging. So like, no, I guess not.
I thought it was interesting that you said that you're hopeful for him to change. Whether he will or not is another question. And I do think that points to a success of the movie, that I think it could be very easy for this story to come off as very navel gazing, because it does seem like a dramatization in a fashion of the filmmaker's life and his messiness of his life, with his relationships and all that. So there's that level of navel gazing in the filmmaking, maybe, but also of the character, of it being very much like this interior look at like his failings as a person and like what could he have done better. Like all of this could have come off super navel gazing and like obnoxious, but in the end, like you kind of are rooting for him, I think, whether you think he's getting there or not. And I do think that is a success in the filmmaking, at least, of like getting you on this character side, who I think there's nothing that makes him like, super unlikable or anything, but it would be very easy to just be like, I don't give a shit about this guy, or be neutral to just like not care at all and not like him, So I just wanted to say that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think in terms of like the other people around him, they also are probably just like, oh, he's just like having this moment, like he had a big day or whatever, right. Not to be condescending, but he did have like a big long day, and it was an honor for him and everything. So maybe they thought, oh, he's just reflecting and he's going to get over this. But if he really wants to change, he has to be the change, like he has to really show them like on a daily basis and like going forward that like, yes, I do want to be this way. And then in terms of like his, the navel gazy thing, I do think like, to bring it all the way back around to what Michelle said at the beginning, like I think it was very smart of Bergman to not have the character be in his own flashbacks. Because if you have some other actor playing this, you're going to be making all these judgments about him as a young person and how he was behaving. And from this remove, you're not seeing that. You're just seeing the older version of himself reacting to these things that he thinks happened, or these events that seem to have shaped him.
And it kind of sets him up as a victim in a way. Like he's a victim of these other people's behaviors that he can't control,
Yeah, I wouldn't have necessarily used the word victim, but I mean, you can just, I think it's valid, but I wasn't thinking necessarily in that term, but just in terms of like, I'm not making judgments about who he was, and I can only judge him from who he is now. So,
the movie starts sort of with him, it doesn't start with the memory flashbacks, but I think that was sort of like kind of the impetus of him wanting to change, because I mean, we don't know what happened previous to that. And this was the first time he had, had a dream that really affected him this way, that made him want to, this series of events happened because he had the first dream or the first memory. So I feel like he was in a position where he wanted to kind of do this, and everything that happened after that sort of led into that, but he was in the right mindset to do it.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, because I don't remember who was saying it earlier, like, but basically, this is a big moment for him, or he had a big day, but like, so people might be chalking it up to that in his life, in the present day of the film, but we also don't know if for them this is just the latest instance of him like doing this thing of like being kind of like, oh, I want to change. But we are keyed into the fact that he had this dream that Steven's talking about. So that's what precipitated this version of this instance of this, and what makes us as viewers think like maybe this is like a real thing for him. It's not like just an empty promise, sort of an empty, what's the word, gesture of like, I want to change and I want to tell people that I want to change. We're keyed into his inner monologue in a way that the people in his life aren't.
And speaking of inner monologue, I remember the film opens with his narration, right? And it goes away as we get on the road. And I, sometimes, narration can feel stilted. For me, I liked it. It almost was like a confessional or something. I felt like it. I liked hearing his inner voice and getting to know who he was in his own, words, in his own mind. And then I'm glad that it went away too. And then does it come back at the end? I think maybe a little bit, right? Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he talks about how when he's had like a hard day or like a sad day, he thinks about memories of his childhood.
Right.
And
he's
so I
like
do
snuggled
that.
up in the pillow. Yeah. I found that moving. And then as far as like his big day, I liked that they didn't really make a big deal about the ceremony. I think they might have even shown just 2 shots, So to me, I don't think that was like, it was kind of more just the device, right? To get them on the road and to go somewhere and have something to do.
I don't agree with that because
No?
there were like, I was kind of shocked by how big this ceremony was. They were firing cannons and stuff.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, but yeah, we were both like, what is going on? What is this ceremony? Like, is this normal?
Well, we're like, it can't just be for him. There's got to be like a cohort, right?
Yeah.
Of like
True.
other scientists, doctor people. Like what? And then they just like
Maybe.
put the hat on him. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that said, I think the gist of what you're saying is still stands. It is sort of like he's on his way to the ceremony, then bing, bing, boom, we're out of the ceremony. But there's like all these shots of like pomp and circumstance really quickly
That's right.
that show that it is somehow a big deal. But like, I do think the film dramatizes that to him, maybe not so much as you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the journey, not the destination.
I just wanted to mention that because I thought the cannons were hilarious. I was like, what the hell?
We were both just like, what? Cannons.
Yeah.
Like, do they even have those in Sweden? What?
So those are our thoughts on Wild Strawberries. We'll share our final thoughts on the movie and answer our bonus question after the break. And we are back. So, what was your favorite scene or moment or elements of the movie? And Michelle, we'll start with you.
I really liked the 2 dreams. Those felt darker and more surreal and a little bit more experimental. I mean, not really experimental, but just the tonally and visually, they were, set apart from the rest of the narrative, and I just felt like they gave you like a different, they gave you a little more insight into maybe what was going on in his psyche. And the second dream sequence, I liked how they used the characters that we had met earlier on the road, and I just like kind of the dreamlike quality.
All right, Stephen.
I really enjoyed Marianne when she was at the mother's house and the reaction shots that we got from her when Isaac was interacting with his mother, because you could kind of tell that she was drinking everything in that was happening. And she sort of was like, this is what I'm in for, having this child. And interestingly enough, when I did watch the movie again after the reveal that she was having a baby, you look at the movie in a completely different way, because it's sort of like, this is what my life will be like if I end up having this baby with this man. And for her, it was just sort of like, what am I going to do with this information? But I need to kind of continue with this to know, I have to see this through. But it was just kind of an interesting moment. And I appreciated that a lot more on the second viewing.
She's holding the doll too, right? When she has that severe look on her face.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mia?
My favorite scene was when in the first flashback, when they're in the Swedish summer house and they're all having dinner together and everyone's just like all the time. I just loved that.
Alicia?
Yeah, I also I liked the whole first memory of the house and with the family and everything, and the scene between the brother and Sarah. And I read something where Bergman was quoted as saying he was on a trip to do something, and he also stopped in his hometown, and he stopped at a house where I don't know if it was his house or his grandmother's house or something like that. And he had the thought of like, oh, what if you could just open the door and walk back into like the past and experience the past, and then walk in another door and see some other thing and then come back out into reality. And I was like, that's really interesting. And he was talking about confronting yourself in all these different ways and at all these different times in your life. And I was like thinking about living in New York. Sometimes I do feel like after being here for 20 years, sometimes I'll turn a corner and be on a certain street that I haven't been on in such a long time because it's such a big city and it's not like you're driving around all parts of it all the time. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, like, that's my little ghost walking down that street over there, going to Rafifi on a Friday night or something, and so so I liked that. Yeah.
Good for dancing or for comedy?
Well, dancing, really. I did do some comedy there, see some comedy there, but mostly I went dancing in that era.
Yeah. I wasn't sure what I was going to answer to this, but then someone in the course of our conversation pointed out that we don't have a younger actor playing him in the flashbacks. I like his absence from the flashbacks. I think it works really well for the movie. And then when he does kind of, like, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm misremembering, but he starts to interact as an old man with some of his, I guess, thoughts, if you want to call them that. And I like that they go that approach rather than like casting someone and having him be a part of it. Like, I think his absence from them makes them more haunting and abstract in a way. And I like that that's the approach rather, and adds that kind of almost surreal element that, like I said at the beginning of the show, I found was missing from watching it this time, but it's actually there maybe. And that's how they achieve it. Maybe that's why I remembered it as being more surreal, is because of that like disconnected feel that's built into it. I think it's just really effective. Also the cannons. So has the movie, as far as you're concerned, stood the test of time? Or another way of framing it, do you think it resonates today? And Stephen, let's start with you.
I do. I think any movie where you're kind of on a road trip to kind of figure out who you are is always resonant, no matter how old you get. And then second, I do like just the use of, just kind of being more introspective about what your life was like and, things that you might have made mistakes on or what people think of you. And then kind of being willing to change, or at least thinking about changing. I think that that's kind of an important thing that people can always kind of come away with and figure out that it actually does resonate for them. So yeah, I think it does.
Michelle?
What Stephen just said. I totally agree with what you said. And, there are definitely some dated elements to the movie and Sarah the Hitchhiker, maybe a little bit of why the aversion to her. It was kind of like, to me, it was a little bit of a dated performance, but I liked it still for what she served, and she was entertaining. But yeah, I think the overall themes and the self-reflection and the themes of loneliness and regret and life choices are just timeless.
Alicia?
Yeah, I don't know what to say, but I think Stephen and Michelle both said it perfectly. It's great. Like, I would recommend it. Like, I wasn't moved to the same extent this time as I was the first time I saw it. But I do think, like what Stephen said earlier, it probably just takes one significant birthday in your life for it to take on that meaning again, or to take it on that meaning the first time or whatever. But yeah, there's a reason that it still gets remade in a million different ways, a million different times. Like, there's something there. Yeah. So for sure.
Mia?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. And I think the lack of emotional impact, like Alicia just said, I think is just more of a timing issue for me personally. But I thought it was great. I think it's universal themes. I think pretty much anyone would watch this and come away with something. And it's kind of nice. Like, I feel good about this movie in a way that it's kind of like, oh, it's nice to look forward to this, to think like, oh, I could watch this. Like, I kind of feel like I have it in my back pocket, and I know like, oh, if I feel sad, I could watch this movie and feel sadder, and that would be fun. So, it's nice to have something to look forward to.
Yeah, I think it resonates, and I think it's largely because it's like an archetypal film in a way. As Alicia said, it's kind of been remade in all these different ways by in certain ways by other filmmakers. I definitely think knowing that Tarkovsky considered it one of his favorite films makes a lot of sense after having seen Mirror, because I think that is a movie that is at its base doing the same thing of like having a lead character who is looking back on their life and kind of trying to determine what did it add up to, was it worth it, what formed me. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, like having talked a second ago about the absence of our lead character in his own flashbacks in this movie, as I remember Mirror anyway, like we barely see the main character in that movie. It's so much from his POV. So it's almost like pushing the envelope of what you could do with that, and it's a much more surreal movie, I think, than this one. But it's but at its core, it seems very related to this movie and just road movies in general. Like, yeah, I think a lot of road movies probably pull from this in a way of just being like a format through which you can examine things through having experiences that bring up stuff, you know? Not that all road movies do that, but certainly some do, and it's effective.
Oh, can I say one last thing? In the like nightmare sequence, there was a little bit when after he watches his wife in that like affair scene, and he's talking to the other doctor who was the guy, the like bad guy that they picked up, and there was that almost like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind clip there. Did anyone else notice that? He was like, what he said something about a removal and an operation, and then he said, what's the price? And he said loneliness, and it made me think of Eternal Sunshine and like getting your memories wiped, but then you have like the loneliness because you don't remember that. And I was like, oh, I wonder if this was like part of the genesis for that idea and stuff. So I just didn't know if anyone else had noticed that or not.
I don't remember that, so I guess I didn't notice it. But I mean, there's almost no way that Charlie Kaufman isn't a huge Ingmar Bergman fan, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So that all brings us to our bonus question, which I think is obviously very related to what this movie is, as they normally are. What is your favorite road movie? And how about we start with Mia?
It was hard to choose because I realized I like a lot of road and road trip movies. But I decided to go kind of like in a different direction from what I was kind of originally like thinking with my answer and say Borat, because I love that movie and it's a road movie. And I loved it when it came out, obviously, like everyone else in America, like thought it was like so funny and great. And then was it in the pandemic? Yeah. Early on in the pandemic, like literally like April 2020, Jeremiah and I rewatched Borat and like a couple other movies from that era. And we were just like, oh my God, this movie is like still so freaking good. But like it was so scary. We were like, he knew what was coming with like the 2016 election and just like so much stuff. So if you haven't rewatched it recently, I would definitely say give it a watch. Like I would even be down to rewatch it again just to see like if there's even more stuff. Because obviously, like I said, we watched it in 2020 and like a lot of stuff has happened since then. But yeah, I was just like, whoa, like Sacha Baron Cohen is a genius. He's so prescient. So yeah, that's my pick for a road movie.
Yeah, I feel like some movies go into the wilderness or need to for a while. And like that was one where like I thought it worked really well at the time it came out. And then there were several years where like if I watched that movie, I'd be like, ugh, cringe, not good. I mean, not bad, but just sort of like, what were we all thinking in a way of like, but then it came kind of back around around the time that we watched it, where it was like, this connects
there. But it's still also though, lots of like I remember my sisters and I making lots of like, she will break cage and get you jokes or things like that. And I'm like, oh God, like, yeah, definitely some of the like rape and things like that. Like we don't need those anymore.
Yeah.
I had a hard time choosing too, because I was like trying to think of road movies, and then I just Googled it just to see, and then I was like, oh my God, like there's actually so many good road movies. And but I think I'm gonna go with Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. I just love that movie. It's just so funny and like life affirming and weird, and And also considering what a lot of places in this country right now are trying to do to people that just want to dress up in drag and put on a show. I think it's like a good movie to watch to remind yourself that these are like people and they're just like you and me, and they're not trying to do anything terrible. They just trying to do their thing.
Good choice. Steven.
I'm going to go with The Wizard of Oz. Just
Oh.
because it's a real road. It's kind of plays into what we're talking about with, dreaming and wanting to go home and, getting friends along the way that you kind of help solve their problems. I think it's just a timeless movie and everybody's seen it.
Right.
So,
yeah. And you could argue it's related to this movie in a way of like, there's a character that is the same actor in both the dreaming part and the like quote unquote real part. Michelle.
Can I say a tie? Can I have a tie?
Sure.
I'm going to go with Pee-wee's Big Adventure because it's just like a perfect movie.
Yes. Great answer.
And also Thelma and Louise, which I saw in college and it just like bowled me over, it just had such a big impact. And then I think I probably had seen it one or two other times along the way. And then I think last year at the Film Forum, they actually had a great road movie series, and I saw it with a crowd again, and it was awesome. I mean, there are definitely some dated aspects to that too, like Scott, like he plays, instead of like a score, like there's like there are at least a couple scenes where there's just like a kind of bad like 90s type of song playing,
Right.
But just, I mean, I don't know. Besides that, I think it's perfect, and the screenplay is so perfect, and Sarandon and Davis were just like brilliant, and their characters and the journey they went on was just so amazing.
Yes, Mia.
And
Have you
young
not seen
Brad
it?
Pitt.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just wanted you to name all the actors.
Yes. And Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah.
All good answers. I'm pretty sure, I'm trying to remember. I think I projected movies for a class in college called, like, that was about road movies for the cinema studies department at NYU. It was a summer course, I think. And, but I'll come back around to that in a second. The movie I'm going to say is Children of Men, just because I love that movie. I think it's so good. And I guess it counts as a road movie when I think about it. Like, I don't know if that it comes to mind as a road movie right off, but I was like looking at a bunch of movies that I rate highly, and it occurred to me that should count, and it's great. But going back to that class, my college girlfriend was in that class and wrote her final paper for that class. Mia's looking at me. Wrote her final paper on After Hours, the Martin Scorsese movie, and was making the case that it's a road movie because even though it's just him trying to get from downtown Manhattan back uptown. And I thought it was like a really clever concept, and actually was like, I bought it. I was like, that's a good idea. And am still annoyed that she got like a lower grade on it because he was like, it's not a road movie. And the professor was like, it's not a road movie, so lowering your grade from what would have been otherwise, which I thought was lame.
Justice for Jen.
That is a journey that can sometimes be a true odyssey.
Exactly.
People don't understand.
He was from Italy, so maybe I hadn't really thought about it, that maybe he just didn't have the experience of trying to get across New York without a subway fare in the 80s. So,
Yikes.
Yeah. Anyway, After Hours road movie. Let's start that. Let's start that cult. Okay. So our next episode is my sixth pick. It is Beau Travail, directed by Claire Denis. It was released in 1999. available with a subscription on the Criterion channel or to rent via Apple, Amazon, Google, etc. And I'll just also point out again that this is a movie that entered into qualifying for this show in the 2022 Sight and Sound polling, which is part of the reason I picked it, which I'll reiterate, I'm sure, when we cover it next episode. Well, that's it for this episode of Stereoactive Movie Club. You can subscribe to the show just about anywhere you listen to podcasts. We invite you to join our conversations about movies by joining our Facebook group, and you can find a link to that along with our email address, links to a lot of the places where you can find the show and other info by going to stereoactivemedia.com/Stereoactive Movie Club. If you have a moment, please rate and review the show on Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that allows you to do that. It helps others to find the show, and we really appreciate it. Also, you can get updates about this show and plenty of other stuff by following Stereoactive Media on Instagram or Twitter. Thanks for listening.
Stereoactive Movie Club.
This podcast is produced by Stereoactive Media.